This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Josh Ritter, Farm Loan Chief with Kansas FSA, begins today's show. He discusses Farm Service Agency's Farm Operating Loan and the Youth Loan Program. Continuing today's show is K-State agricultural economist Robin Reid with the new Kansas Agricultural Land Values and Trends. She says that this report provides a lot of data to people interested in Kansas agricultural land. The Beef Cattle Institute's Ask the Experts concludes this Wednesday's show with a conversation on how often cattle producers should be checking their cattle out at Pasture. Brad White, Brian Lubbers, and Phillip Lancaster answer this listener's question. That and more's coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Wednesday show, as we usually do, with a Farm Service Agency update. And in to give us one today is Farm Loan Chief with Kansas Farm Service Agency, Josh Ritter. Josh, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
And Josh, today you wanted to talk about the Farm Operating Loan. And so to get started about that, kind of what is it and why are we talking about it?
Sure, yeah. We have a direct farm operating loan program. And really with this program, these are funded directly through FSA to the producer, and then FSA is going to make and service that loan. So the producer will be working directly with FSA on these loans. And the main objective of the direct farm operating loan program is to use that program to finance any farm operating expenses that a customer might have, a producer might need.
And so real fast on loans, it's not going through a bank, it's going through the Farm Service Agency.
Correct. Our direct loan programs are directly through Farm Service Agency.
And so talking a little bit more about this, when you say the program is used to finance farm operating expenses, what is that exactly?
Yeah, that's a fair point. And they can really be used for a variety of different purposes. One of the primary purposes is to purchase machinery, equipment, and or livestock that are necessary for the farm operation. The program can also be used to finance annual operating expenses that would include feed, seed, fertilizer, pesticides, farm supplies, and cash rent payments. Then we can also use the program for costs associated with reorganizing a farm to improve profitability. A common example of this is to purchase equipment needed to convert from conventional practice to no-till production. And then there's also the last way is that the program, we can use it to refinance non-real estate farm-related debts. So that's any debt that's farm-related but doesn't deal directly with real estate. So there's really several different ways that producers can take advantage of our operating loan program to help expand their operation and improve profitability.
So for farms, this is for possibly ones that focus on crops or livestock. It's really not either way, but can be anything agriculture related.
Correct. Yeah, they can be used for either livestock or crop production, or even things outside the box too. I mean, we're kind of opening it up to different avenues too.
And so obviously a loan deals with finances. So what are some important information when considering that?
Yeah, I think the first thing I want to point out is that the maximum loan amount available under this program is $400,000. That's a cumulative total. So if a producer has an outstanding $200,000 operating loan, then they could apply for another direct operating loan for up to an additional $200,000. The repayment terms vary based on what the loan purpose is, but they'll never exceed 7 years under this program. Generally, annual operating loans are repaid within 12 months or when the commodities produced are sold. Currently, the interest rate on the program is 4.5%. That interest rate does adjust monthly, but once the loan is closed, that interest rate will be fixed for the life of the loan.
So it's what the interest rate is for now, but if it changes, then that interest rate is going to change. But once you set it in there, that's what it is for the span of that loan.
Correct. Yep. Once we made that loan to the borrower, that interest rate that they're locked in at their interest rate for the life of the loan.
And something I want to clarify on that is that the loans can be used with other FSA loans.
Correct. Yeah.
If you already have a loan with FSA, you might also possibly be able to get a farm operating loan as well.
Correct. Yeah. And really on the direct side, we have two main programs, which are our operating loans that we're talking about today and our farm ownership loans. And those farm ownership loans are basically our real estate purchase loans.
So what are some other requirements that producers have to meet to be eligible for FSA's Direct Farm Operating Loan Program?
There's really a lot of different eligibility criteria that producers will need to work through with their local office, but there are a couple things to keep in mind. And I think, the first one is if a producer can obtain sufficient credit elsewhere at reasonable rates and terms, then they're not going to be eligible to work with FSA for a direct loan. So our direct program doesn't compete with commercial lenders. Also, our direct operating loans require applicants to have sufficient education, training, or at least 1 year's experience in managing or operating the farm to be eligible. To meet this requirement through education, the applicant needs to have completed an educational program in agriculture. That would include either a 2 or 4 year degree from a college in ag business, horticulture, animal science, agronomy, or any other ag-related field. To meet the requirement through farm experience, the applicant has to have been an owner, manager, or operator of a farm business for at least one entire production cycle. Generally, the easiest way to show that is through production records and income and expense records like a Schedule F from a tax return.
So if a producer doesn't know if they quite meet these requirements, is it worth them just going in and talking because they might actually meet them even if they don't think they do?
Definitely. If something a producer's interested in, they should reach out to their local office and have some of those conversations with them.
And something cool that you mentioned before we got started was the FSA Youth Loan Program. Could you tell us a bit about what that is?
Yeah, for sure. We do have a youth loan program that's available to kids and young adults between the ages of 10 and 20. The maximum loan amount for that program is $5,000, and the interest rate's currently at our 4.5%. The Youth Loan Project has to provide an opportunity for the young person to acquire experience and education in agriculture-related skills, and the project needs to be sponsored by an advisor such as a 4-H club, FFA, tribal youth organization, or similar agriculture-affiliated group. The program offers, I think, a great avenue for kids and younger adults to become familiar with the loan-making process and get experience with financial management with the help of an advisor. And a lot of these times, the program is going to be used for a fair project and gives the opportunity for some kids to buy a steer, heifer, or pig, something like that they otherwise wouldn't be able to afford to do so. So I think, it's a really fun program. It's fun for the kids to get involved and be able to get that financing they need to get a project started for either 4-H or FFA.
And is that something that even if the parents aren't involved with FSA, that the youth could still participate in? For sure, yeah, yep. And is that, once again, just going to your local FSA office and walking through all the details of that? Yeah, it would be. And it's really quite a bit shorter process, an application process, since we're not dealing with, quite so big a dollar figure. So it's a pretty simple process for those kids to kind of go through. And I know a lot of times in the past we've talked about the FSA things, and a lot of times they have a deadline to them, but these programs don't. They're kind of a year-round thing whenever you're ready to do it. Correct. Yeah, you're right. Like on our farm program side, we do deal with hard deadlines quite a bit, but with our farm loans, there are no deadlines whenever you need the financing. Come in and apply. Sometimes in the past, we've had funding issues where we run out of funds as we wait for a new budget, but that hasn't been an issue for quite some time now, and it looks like we have good funding to finish out this year for sure. So I would encourage everybody to come on in and apply if they're interested. And if someone is interested in the Farm Operating Loan or the Youth Loan Program or really anything else FSA has to offer, where could they find out more information? Yeah, I think the first place I would tell anybody interested in our Farm Loan Program to do is to contact their local farm loan office and speak with one of our farm loan employees directly. We do have 21 farm loan offices in Kansas. If you're not familiar with where those are located, just go to whichever local FSA office you work with, and they'll be able to point you in the right direction and get you any information you might need moving forward there. And additionally, we're kind of obviously in person, we love it, but we're also kind of moving more towards some online stuff too. And there is a lot of information on Farmers.gov regarding farm loan programs available through FSA. That website does include information on our loan programs and also a loan assistance tool that explains the various loan options to users and also provides some guidance on how eligibility is determined for FSA loans. In order to directly access the farm loan tools available through Farmers.gov, a person needs to go to www.farmers.gov, then /loans. A lot of information there. Josh, I appreciate you coming in and sharing it with us. Thank you. I appreciate your time. That was Kansas Farm Service Agency Farm Loan Chief Josh Ritter sharing information about FSA's Farm Operating Loan and Youth Loan Program. If you'd like to find out more information about this, the resources that he mentioned will be linked in today's show notes, which can be found on agtoday.net. Kansas State University is hosting a few upcoming events that I would like to tell you about. The first one being the Wheat Disease Field Day that's happening in Manhattan, Kansas, June 5th at the K-State Rocky Ford Plant Pathology Research Farm. Topics that will be presented on this day will include wheat disease management, research updates, breeding efforts for Fusarium head blight, stem rust, barley yellow dwarf virus, and tan spot. There will also be pre-breeding efforts using WGRC collection of wheat wild relatives, predictive models for forecasting wheat diseases, and wheat disease diagnostics and updates from the K-State Wheat Diagnostic Lab. Registration for this event is free, but they do ask that you go ahead and register so they can plan out the meals, which lunch will be included on this day. Again, that is the Wheat Disease Field Day that's taking place Monday, June 5th from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. at K-State Rocky Ford Plant Pathology Research Farm. Another event that is currently taking place is the 2023 Wheat Plot Tours. The last event is happening on June 8th. However, there are a few more upcoming in Republic County, Ellis County, Dickinson County, Thomas County, and Washington County. If you are interested in the field day or the 2023 plot tours, you can find links to both of these at agtoday.net. If you're interested in just keeping up to date with the agronomy department here at K-State, you can also sign up for the agronomy e-updates by going to eupdate.agronomy.ksu.edu. The links to all of these will be found in today's show notes, which you can find on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and the K-State Agricultural Economics Department has recently put out their Kansas Agricultural Land Values and Trends, and a big contributor to that is K-State Agricultural economist Robin Reid. Robin, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I always enjoy when this book gets published, as it's a really good resource for all kinds of producers, bankers, anybody out there that is looking at the land values market.
You mentioned this is a resource and provides a lot of information. And so what can it tell people about land values?
Well, first of all, this is kind of a unique resource that we have here in Kansas. So we started this about 5 years ago, and we produce it jointly with the Kansas Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers. Rather than survey data, this is actual land sales that have occurred throughout our entire state that involved tracts of agricultural land. And really the interesting thing is we can see all those sales, go ahead and repackage them into a summary form, and let the public know what those values are. Specifically, what we do is I have trends for the last 7 years in this year's book, and I know the county the parcel's located in, the acres that are involved in the sale, whether it was non-irrigated, irrigated crop ground, or pasture ground, or a mixture of those. Any of the improvements on the ground, such as buildings or houses, are removed, so we're just looking at the land value. And I also take out any parcels that are under 70 acres, just trying to get that development influence out of the picture. So really, when you look at the book, you will see a state-level land value, regional land values for our 9 crop reporting districts in Kansas, and then what everybody's looking for is the county-level land values. So for each county that has at least 4 sales that were primarily irrigated, dry land, or pasture, I can publish a county value that has both a minimum and a maximum, and then a statistical average for that county. So that's what everybody's really looking for in these land values books.
Sounds like taking a lot of data and making it consumable for people to actually interpret. And so with all that information, what is happening with the Kansas land value market?
So it has been really interesting to look at the last 3 years. I've been studying the land market for quite a few years now, And the last time we saw land values increasing or a run-up in land values of this scale was back between 2010 and 2014. A lot of people probably remember that is when we had a large run-up, and then we hit 2015. The farm economy slowed down, commodity prices came down, and we were really worried at that time there was a land bubble that had formed, and is it going to pop? Are we going back to the 1980s? And really what happened in those next 5 or 6 years is land values just kind of leveled off, kind of held steady as we had struggles in the farm economy. And then at the end, the fall of 2020, obviously 2020 was the pandemic, but we saw commodity prices really take off during harvest that fall, basically. And with that, the land market too just kind of took off. We had a lot of government payments in those years, the CFAP payments. We had higher commodity prices, and this just added to fuel for the fire, basically, of the land value market taking off. And ever since then, had some really high land value increases. To specifically talk about 2022 compared to the previous year, we kind of knew already land values were up 25-26% according to USDA in their survey data. But when I actually looked at the land sales value based on the actual sales that drive the numbers in this book, I have Kansas values up 30% over what they were in 2021. So all categories, irrigated, pasture, dryland, cropland, all up about 30% just in 1 year over what they were in 2021. Now, we can kind of look at that compared to other states using the USDA survey information for other states. And ironically, Kansas is a lower value state. You always hear the record sales in Iowa and Illinois, but Kansas actually saw a larger increase in land value last year than any of the surrounding states. And that's true for both cropland and pasture. So it's been really interesting to watch the Kansas market here. I know there's a number of things influencing, but overall, just a very, very sharp increase in land value in 2022 and actually in 2021 as well.
And so you've mentioned a few things that have influenced an increase in land value, but what is kind of a more full scope of that?
So there's a number of things. The first thing I definitely want to talk about is just farm profitability, or we use net farm income to kind of gauge farm profitability. When I talked about those trends in when the land market was up and down, it correlates very strongly with what was going on as far as net farm income. So our Kansas Farm Management Association is kind of the benchmark we use, our association farms, of how is their profitability, and using that to kind of proxy the state as a whole in far as net farm income. And when we saw that last really big drop in net farm income from 2014 to 15, that's like when I said the land values really just leveled off. Didn't fall necessarily. But then as we saw net farm income really picking up, 2021 being one of the best net farm income years that we have ever seen, over $300,000 per farm at the state level. Obviously, that gives a lot of buying power to farmers to be bidding on land and cash rent as well. But land values, very much increasing in that year. 2022, I think you just had an interview with Mark Dykman, our director of KFMA, and we did see net farm income not near as good as we saw in 2021. But if you look at an overall picture, what we did see is still pretty strong historically in profitability. Now, what happens going forward was a little more questionable. We'll get into that too. But really, land values are being supported by profitability in the ag sector. A lot of government payments, good commodity prices in recent years really fuels the land market. Some other things influencing it, obviously inflation, as we've had that during the pandemic and still struggling some with it now, that adds to land values. One thing that will be kind of pulling land values the other direction, be careful to say we're not going backwards. We're going to probably increase at a slower rate, but the interest rates will start influencing, probably have already, the land market. Interest rates are higher than we've seen in a long time, although not historically like we've seen in the 80s, but obviously that's going to have an influence going forward. And then the last thing I'll mention is outside of ag investment into farmland here in Kansas. That might be outside hunters that want to come in and buy some pasture land for hunting. That's a trend that we've seen very, very high over the last couple of years here in our state. Or just investment as a diversification to a portfolio as far as buying a piece of farm ground, having it professionally managed, and buying it as an investment for resale later on.
Robin, you've done this trend report for many, many years. And so looking at what you think 2023 might be showing.
So that's really the million-dollar question. As I've been talking to bankers and realtors and producers across the state, what I'm really hearing is the market is starting to cool off a little bit, which I would argue is a good thing. You know, as we have land values increasing, that helps the farmer's balance sheet. Their farm is worth more. But any time you want to try to expand the farm or a young person trying to get into the industry, these higher land prices are just a very big barrier to doing any of those activities. So I would argue we want this land market to slow down. 30% increase year over year is not sustainable in any shape or form. So as we're looking at the sales that have already occurred this year, how I predict the rest of the year going, we're still going to be increasing in land value. We won't be increasing 30%, though. I think we would come back to a more moderate increase just because of the interest rates, the farm economy looking not bleak, but a little more uncertain this year with commodity prices versus input costs being a little bit less in balance. And the drought. We still have a lot of drought pressure throughout the state. So end of the day, we are still going to be increasing, but not near the rate that we saw this past year.
Talking kind of on a whole state of Kansas, but I would like to mention that in this Ag Land Values and Trends book, it does break Kansas down into 9 sections.
Yeah, and that's, I keep talking about the state trend, but you're exactly right in that regional trends and county trends can be completely different. So looking at the book, looking at the values for your county, seeing how those compare. Another disclaimer I'd like to throw out there, too, is just nobody's ground is average, even within a county. There is so much difference between the quality of the land, where it's located in proximity to somebody's farm, road access, all of those things play into the value. So even looking at your county value and the minimum and the maximum, you're going to fall in that spectrum somewhere. But it really does inform a starting point for where that land value might be for your parcel of ground.
And if people would like to find this book, where could they do that?
So the easiest way is to go on our website, AgManager.info, AgManager.info. And if you look under farm management section, there's a land buying and valuing, and I believe it's the first resource on that list. Otherwise, you can always go in the search and just type in Kansas Land Values book and it'll come up. But I've ordered 3,000 copies of this book, and they are currently being sent out to all of our 105 county offices across the state. So if you'd like to go in and get a hard copy of this book, that's a great way to get it, is to go visit your county extension office.
Robin, thank you for coming in and sharing some information on the 2022 Kansas Land Values and Trends book. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Shelby. And people are always welcome to reach out to me as well by email. You can find it on our website if they have questions on land values or on this resource.
That was K-State agricultural economist Robin Reid. We will link all of the resources that she mentioned as well as her email in today's show notes, which you can find on agtoday.net. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude Wednesday's show, as we usually do, with Beef Cattle Institute's Ask the Experts. Today's experts are Brad White, Brian Lubbers, and Phillip Lancaster. They answer a listener's question about how often they should be checking their cattle.
Hi, welcome to BCI Ask the Experts. I'm Brad White. Happy to have two good experts with me here today, Dr. Brian Lubbers.
Morning, Brad. Morning, Phillip.
And Dr. Phillip Lancaster.
Good morning, guys.
So we're happy to have them with us because on this program, we get to answer your questions, and based on their answers, they'll each get up to 10 points. So let's jump into today's listener question, which I think is a really good one. And the listener asks, how often should I check my summer pastures in the cow-calf herd? Brian, I'm going to go to you first.
I think, and I know this is difficult and it's going to sound unrealistic, but I think you need to be in there at least twice a week. I think 2 times a week is kind of minimum. And I know generally it's like they're out on pasture, they're taking care of themselves. In a lot of situations, people have other things that they're doing, that they kind of plan other things at that time of the year, whether maybe it's kind of late to be planting some crops. But I might be planting some crops. I might be doing some maintenance around the farm. And it's kind of seen as the cow herd at that time as a low maintenance part of the operation. But I don't think that's necessarily true. So I think 2 times a week.
Okay. It's low maintenance, but not no maintenance. 2 times a week. Philip?
Well, I think from a forage perspective, you need to be out there checking grass and seeing where they're grazing. And it really depends on the grazing system that you have. If you're in a continuous system where all the cattle just have access to the whole pasture, you're out there every couple of weeks to look at the grass and get across the pasture and see how much they've got left and if you need to adjust stocking rate or anything like that, or there's areas that they're overgrazing and you need to try to change grazing behavior and move them to a new area. But if you're in a rotational grazing, intensive grazing management system, you're out there maybe every day or maybe every couple of days to move cattle to new pastures. And so you're keeping a good eye on the pastures and probably keeping a good eye on the cattle at the same time.
Okay. So Brian said twice a week. You said either once every 2 weeks or daily, depending on what type of grazing system you're running. So that leads me to, and Brian, I'll turn back to you. What do you actually want to look at when you're out there?
Yeah, so I didn't clarify that initially, so maybe I should come back. So I'm thinking twice a week is primarily the cows, right? That's what I'm interested. That's why I say you need to be out there twice a week. Things happen. There's injuries. There's disease outbreaks. So I'm out there a couple of times a week just to check on the cows. And as a veterinarian, the forage can also be checked at that time, right? So there's nothing, you can look at the forage and kind of do your long-term planning for either rotations or feeding supplemental forages or whatever you need to do at the same time. But I'm interested in the cows.
And especially, that's what I was going to say and the bulls,
Yep.
and especially during breeding season,
Yes,
right?
especially.
So you're thinking about injuries, and that may be something that would require rapid action. If it's my only bull, he gets injured, somebody has to breed the cows.
Yes.
Right? Philip, what are you looking at?
I think Brian's right. From an immediate standpoint, checking the cows and making sure everybody's healthy is the most important part. But then from a long-term standpoint, monitoring the pasture and keeping track of over time, from season to year, from season to season, what's that pasture look like? How does it respond to grazing and different rain levels or drought years or things like that, and documenting that and having that so that you know what to expect and how your pasture responds in different situations.
Okay. So you guys are tied up 7-7, and now I'm thinking of 2 other things that you might want to check every time you're there. Let's see if you can name them.
Water.
That's where I was going. Yeah. Fence.
No, cattle check that on their own.
Well, the neighbors check it.
One other thing, Brian's got the 1 point.
Mineral.
Oh, there you go. Brian got them both. So I think checking with whatever frequency when you're out there, and mineral, Philip, that's right up your alley. Brian ends up with 9 points. Philip ends up with 7. Thank you for joining us. If you have questions you'd like us to answer, you can send us an email at bci@ksu.edu.
Once again, that was Kansas State University's Beef Cattle Institute Ask the Experts. Today's experts were Brad White, Brian Lubbers, and Phillip Lancaster. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow on Agriculture Today.